Rich CEO pretends to sleep to test the shy maid, then he freezes when seeing what she does. There are moments in life when we realize how little we truly know about the people around us. Sometimes, those moments arrive in the quietest ways when we stop talking and simply watch. This is a story about one such moment, about trust, and about the unexpected grace that can exist between two very different lives. Martin Ashford had built an empire from nothing. At 48 years old, he sat atop a Fortune 500 company, lived in a home that could have graced the cover of any architectural magazine, and commanded respect in every boardroom he entered. His dark hair showed just a touch of distinguished gray at the temples, and his presence had the kind of quiet authority that made people listen when he spoke. But lately, Martin had been thinking about something. His late wife, Catherine, used to say, "You can't really know someone until you see who they are when they think no one's watching." Catherine had been gone for 3 years now. The house felt enormous without her laughter, without her kindness filling the rooms. Martin found himself working longer hours, staying later at the office, because coming home to the silence was sometimes too much to bear. That's when he hired Elena. Elena Hartwell was 26 years old. With blonde hair she kept neatly pulled back in a low ponytail and the kind of gentle manner that reminded Martin of simpler, kinder times. She'd been working as his housekeeper for about 4 months now. She arrived each Tuesday and Friday afternoon, moving through the house like a whisper, so quiet, so careful not to disturb anything. She was shy. That much was obvious from the first day. When Martin tried to make conversation, asking about her day or offering her coffee, she would blush and give the briefest of answers before excusing herself to continue her work. He learned almost nothing about her, except that she did her job beautifully and seemed to pour genuine care into every task. But there was something about Elena that made Martin curious. Perhaps it was the way she would pause sometimes, when dusting the photographs on the mantle, the ones of Catherine, of his children when they were young, of family gatherings long past. She would look at those photos with such tenderness, as if she understood what it meant to miss someone. Or perhaps it was the way she always left small touches around the house. A book on his nightstand would be marked with the proper bookmark instead of left face down. The morning newspaper would be folded neatly beside his favorite chair. Fresh flowers from the garden would appear in Catherine's old vase, arranged simply but beautifully. These weren't things Martin asked for. They were just kindnesses. Still, Martin couldn't shake a nagging doubt that had been planted by his business partner, Richard. Over lunch one afternoon, "You leave this girl alone in your house?" Richard had said, raising an eyebrow. "Martin, I know you want to see the best in people, but you've got valuables everywhere. Art, watches, Catherine's jewelry that you've kept. How well do you really know this woman?" The question had bothered Martin more than he wanted to admit. He'd built his success on reading people, on trusting his instincts about character, but Richard's words planted a seed of doubt. What did he really know about Elena? What did anyone really know about the people they let into their private spaces? That's when Martin decided to conduct a test. It wasn't something he was proud of, exactly, but he needed to know. He needed to be certain. The following Friday afternoon, Martin came home early from the office. He told his assistant he was feeling tired, which wasn't entirely untrue, and drove home through the autumn streets, watching the golden leaves drift past his windshield. Elena's modest blue sedan was already parked in the circular driveway. She was always punctual, always reliable in that way. Martin let himself in quietly, and could hear the distant sound of movement upstairs. He made his way to his study on the first floor, a wood-paneled room lined with bookshelves and warmed by afternoon sunlight streaming through tall windows. The leather couch sat against one wall, positioned so anyone lying there would have a view of his desk where he often left important documents, his laptop, and lately, some cash he'd withdrawn for a charitable donation he planned to make, about $3,000 in crisp bills, held together with a paper clip, sitting in plain sight. Martin settled himself on the couch, arranging his body as naturally as possible, and closed his eyes. His heart beat a little faster than usual. He felt foolish, honestly. Here he was, a grown man, playing pretend in his own home. But he needed to know. He needed to see who Elena was when she thought no one was watching. The sounds upstairs stopped. The house settled into silence, broken only by the soft ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway and the distant sound of Elena's footsteps on the stairs. Martin kept his breathing slow and steady, the way he imagined a sleeping person would breathe. Through his barely open eyelids, he could see nothing but blurs of light and shadow. The study door, which he'd left ajar, opened gently. He heard Elena's soft gasp. "Oh," she whispered to herself. "He's sleeping." Martin remained perfectly still. He could sense her standing in the doorway, could almost feel her hesitation. Then came the soft sound of her footsteps on the Persian rug. She was moving carefully, trying not to wake him. This was it, the moment that would tell him everything he needed to know. Martin waited, listening. He heard her moving toward his desk. His heart sank just a little, despite himself. But then, he heard something unexpected. The whisper of fabric. The gentle sound of something being draped. Martin felt the weight of a blanket settling over him, carefully placed from his shoulders to his feet. Elena had taken the throw blanket from the back of the couch, the one Catherine had loved. Soft cashmere in deep navy blue, and covered him with it. The kindness of the gesture caught him off guard, but he kept still, kept his breathing even. He heard Elena move away toward the desk. This was it, he thought. This was when he'd find out if Richard's suspicions had any merit. But Elena wasn't rifling through papers. She wasn't opening drawers or examining his laptop. Instead, Martin heard a sound he couldn't quite place at first. A gentle rustling. Then he understood. She was organizing the papers on his desk, straightening them into neat stacks. He heard her move the coffee cup he'd left there that morning, probably taking it to the kitchen. Then came the sound of the desk drawer opening. Martin's pulse quickened again, but all Elena did was take something out. He heard the distinctive sound of his reading glasses case and set it somewhere closer, probably within easier reach. She'd noticed, apparently, that he often couldn't find his glasses when he needed them. Then she did something that made Martin's throat tighten. He heard her pause by the photographs on the bookshelf, the ones of Catherine. And then, so softly, he almost didn't hear it, Elena spoke in a whisper, as if she were in a church. "I'm taking good care of him, ma'am," she said quietly. "I promise. I know how much you must have loved this place. How much you loved him. I can see it in every room." Martin felt something crack in his chest. His eyes began to sting behind his closed lids. Elena was quiet for a moment, and then he heard her moving again, this time to the windows. She adjusted the curtains so the afternoon sun wouldn't shine directly on his face. Small sounds followed, a book being picked up from the floor, the gentle click of a pen being placed in its holder, the soft brush of her hand clearing dust from a surface. She was simply doing her job, but doing it with such care, such attention, such respect for the space and the man who lived in it. Finally, Elena moved toward the door, but she paused there, and Martin heard her footsteps return. They stopped beside the couch. He felt her presence nearby, and then he heard her voice again, barely above a whisper. "I hope you're getting some rest, Mr. Ashford," she said softly. "You work too hard. Everyone needs time to just be still." And then she left, closing the door with barely a sound. Martin lay there for a long time after she was gone. He could hear her moving through other rooms, humming something gentle and melodic to herself as she worked. He opened his eyes and stared at the ceiling, at the blanket she'd covered him with, at the room she'd tenderly cared for. The money still sat untouched on his desk. His laptop was closed. Nothing was missing or out of place, except that everything was somehow more orderly, more cared for than before. Martin sat up slowly, running his hands over his face. He felt ashamed of his test, ashamed that he'd doubted this young woman who had been showing him nothing but kindness for months. But more than that, he felt something else. Something he hadn't felt in a long time. He felt grateful. The following Tuesday, Ellen arrived at her usual time. Martin was waiting in the kitchen, something he rarely did. He'd made coffee, proper coffee, in Catherine's old percolator, and set out 2 cups. When Elena came in through the back door, her eyes widened in surprise. "Oh, Mr. Ashford, I didn't expect I can come back if you're..." "Please, Martin said, gesturing to the chair across from him. Sit with me for a moment. If you have time. Elena hesitated, her natural shyness evident in the way she clutched her bag, but something in Martin's expression must have reassured her, because she slowly set her bag down and took the offered chair. Martin poured coffee into both cups, remembering how Catherine used to do this for anyone who entered her home. The kitchen had always been her favorite room for conversations. Elena, Martin began, wrapping his hands around his warm cup. I need to tell you something, and I need to apologize. She looked up, concern immediate in her eyes. Did I do something wrong? No, Martin said quickly. No, quite the opposite. Last Friday I was testing you. I pretended to be asleep on the couch in my study. I wanted to see what you would do when you thought no one was watching. He watched the realization dawn on her face. She looked down at her coffee, a blush creeping into her cheeks. I'm not proud of it, Martin continued. But I need you to know what I learned. I learned that my instincts about you were right all along. I learned that kindness, real kindness, isn't something that can be faked. You covered me with a blanket. You organized my desk without touching anything private. You spoke to my wife's photograph like you understood what this house means. What she meant. Elena's eyes were glistening now. I lost my mother 2 years ago, she said softly. I know what it's like. Living in a space that's full of memories. I would want someone to treat my mom's things, her memory, with care. So I treat your home the same way. Martin nodded slowly, his own eyes dampening. I'm sorry I tested you. You deserved better than that. I understand, Elena said, meeting his gaze with quiet dignity. Sometimes we have to be careful. The world can be. She searched for the word. Harsh. It can be, Martin agreed, but it can also be kind. Because of people like you. They sat together in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping their coffee as morning light filled Catherine's kitchen. Martin thought about how his wife would have liked Elena, how she would have invited her to stay for lunch, would have asked about her life and dreams with genuine interest. Elena, Martin said finally, would you consider coming 3 days a week instead of 2? I'd pay you more, of course. But honestly, it's not really about the cleaning. This house, it feels more like a home when you're here. It feels cared for again. Elena smiled, really smiled, for perhaps the first time since Martin had met her. I'd like that very much, Mr. Ashford. Martin, he corrected gently. Please, call me Martin. Martin, she repeated, testing the name. Okay. As Elena stood to begin her work, Martin felt something shift in the house. It was subtle, like the change in light when clouds part, but it was there. The silence didn't feel quite so heavy anymore. The memories didn't ache quite so much. Sometimes, he thought, we spend so much time protecting ourselves, building walls and running tests, that we forget how to recognize a gift when it's offered. Sometimes grace arrives quietly, in the form of a young woman who treats a stranger's grief with tender respect, who covers a sleeping man with a blanket, who whispers promises to a photograph. And sometimes, the greatest wisdom we can learn is simply to trust in the fundamental goodness that still exists in this world, if we're brave enough to look for it. A word from the storyteller. Thank you for listening to this story about trust, kindness, and the unexpected connections that can change our lives. If this tale touched your heart, I'd be so grateful if you'd take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Subscribe to the channel for more stories that celebrate the quiet wisdom and gentle grace that come with living a full life. And please, leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, or perhaps a story of your own about a time someone's unexpected kindness changed your perspective. Remember, we're all on this journey together, and sometimes, the smallest gestures carry the greatest meaning. Until next time, take care of each other.